On today's episode of Dance Med Spotlight, I'm speaking with Tashina Beckmann-King. She is an international West Coast swing professional and a mindset and confidence coach. She has years of experience in a variety of styles of dance, all the way up to that professional or champion level, but also 12 years of experience coaching dancers from all over the world. In this episode, we talk about things that are in our subconscious and the power of those things, how it can impact our dancing. Talking about confidence, perfectionism, transitions in life, whether that is transitioning to being a professional dancer or transitioning out of dance, even things in personal life that can impact our dance. We talk a lot about some of the common perspectives or challenges that may come up for an individual dancer and ways that we can try working through some of that. Tashina shares a lot of really great information as well as some resources. If you are looking for any sort of group coaching, one-on-one coaching, she has a lot of things available for folks. So to learn more about Tashina and what she does, as well as our conversation about all these different topics, make sure that you check out this episode today. Welcome back to another episode of Dance Med Spotlight, where we talk about all things dance medicine and dance science. Today, I am excited to have this guest on, somebody who is also here in Colorado with us. We're very lucky to have her, Tashina Beckmann-King. Welcome, Tashina.
Thank you. Great to be here.
So Tashina has a variety of backgrounds that we'll kind of talk about throughout this episode, but she is an international West Coast swing professional and has also been coaching dancers for many years, particularly talking about things like mindset and confidence in their dance. Tell me a little bit about what got you to this point of particularly wanting to get into this coaching piece of what you do.
It is a pretty direct reflection of my own personal experiences and challenges and wanting to and needing to find a way to overcome the stagnation that was happening in my dance career. And so it was from that personal experience where I started to find a lot of shift and transformation take place and noticed the big changes that were happening. And after that was the case, I wanted to be able to help other dancers, whether they were going towards a more professional route in dancing or more of a hobby-based route in dancing. I also wanted to support them in breaking through whatever limitations, blocks, stalling out in their progress. I wanted to help them be able to navigate that from a more non-traditional way, because I feel like oftentimes we try to overcome our challenges with consuming more private lessons or a better dance shoe or more practice time in the studio. And although those things are all critical, helpful, and needed, there's a whole other side to our success, our happiness, and fulfillment in dancing, which is our own internal reality and our internal self-talk. And so it was through working with my own limiting beliefs, really at a subconscious level, that I finally found some breakthrough take place in my dance career. And after that dynamic shift happened, I was like, I have to pass this along. It's too good to just only keep it for myself. I want other dancers to experience it too.
Mm-hmm. I think you have some really great points in there and things that, even as you're talking, I'm kind of reflecting back on for myself of when I first started getting involved in West Coast swing in particular and competing, at first being really hung up on, what do the coaches and the judges want to see? And even things going so far as bringing a million different clothes with me, and I would go down and see what everyone was wearing before competition. And if I saw like a lot of red and purple, then I would go and wear blue. So I stood out. And I mean, like, there was way too much thought going into all of it.
Yeah.
And once I was able to kind of get out of my own head and not get so concerned about the outcome and enjoy sort of the process and the experience, it totally made a difference in just how I felt during competition weekends and things too.
Absolutely. Yeah.
a lot less stressed, that's for sure.
Yeah, anything with stress is not near as much fun. And for many of us, we dance for the fun of it. So the more we can
Mhm.
eliminate stress or dissipate it, the happier the experience is.
Yeah, for sure. What are I guess let's start perhaps with some of the dancers who are at the more kind of amateur level. They're not working as professionals or quite taking that step to professional yet.
Mhm.
What are some common barriers that you maybe see for that type of dancer?
I'm actually going to also include the professionals in that because
Yeah.
it happens for everybody. I find the degree might vary, but usually the base concepts are there for a lot of people.
Mhm.
Um, Perfectionism oftentimes is a huge one that holds us back in whatever style of dancing we might be doing. Because I grew up doing jazz, ballet, hip hop, tap, a lot of solo movement styles. I didn't transition into partner dancing until I was in my early 20s.
Mhm.
And so I remember even in my studio growing up, just some of the conversations and pressures from instructors and during performances, recitals, competitions, that perfectionism was a big piece of things, as we need to be, especially when we're in a troupe or a team that's
Mhm.
competing and performing. That perfectionism is important, but there can be an unhealthy level of perfectionism, and especially when we step into the realm of improv style movement and dancing, where we're moving either as a solo individual or maybe with someone else, when we're so locked into being perfect that it then hinders our ability to create and express in the moment. That oftentimes is a huge block that many people get stuck
Mhm.
on, get hung up on. So that's a pretty typical one. Again, regardless of the style of dance, I find comparing ourselves to other people is a huge one. Whether that's comparing our bodies, our flexibility level, how quickly we progress or improve compared to somebody else's timeline of progression or success, or the results that we might receive compared to somebody else's competition results.
Mhm.
Um, so much self comparison takes place. And
Definitely.
it detracts us again from our ability to express through movement. When our time, attention, energy is fully focused on that, or even partially focused on that, that's energy that's not then diverted to expressing the joy or connecting efficiently or effectively with a partner, or our ability to connect to our audience when we're
Mhm.
performing. So anything that takes us away from what we really want to be experiencing holds us back in some capacity. Yeah, so perfectionism, comparisonitis, if you want to call it that.
Mhm.
Um, Gosh, what else? There's so much that comes into those two umbrellas. I mean, we could have
Yeah.
lots of conversation on more specificities of it. Another really big one, which is so fascinating, is the desire to be seen and
Mm.
recognized, but also at the same time, the fear of being seen and recognized is a pretty typical one that comes up.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, a couple of things that stand out there for me, thinking about the perfectionism piece. Like you said, it's everywhere as a human, as a
Yes.
dancer, regardless of style, all of these different things. And that difference of like enough of it to drive you to improve and continue
Mhm.
to study and all of that, but kind of the dangerous side of it of taking it too far. I've definitely seen some of that. And a lot of times, seeing dancers who maybe are pushing themselves too hard physically, just from my lens as a physical therapist, to try to get that much better. And it's like, no, actually having a little downtime and doing some other stuff might be just the thing your body and brain need right now.
Yeah, honoring the self is a huge part of being a dancer, because when our physical vessel is not able to perform because of internal and external pressures or unhealthy habits, it'll absolutely decrease our ability to be successful
Mm-hmm.
however we're dancing. And a lot of that can come from beliefs that we have about ourselves. And we need to be doing XYZ in order to be accepted, or in order to be good enough, in order to improve.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it can be a very interlaced web of lies, basically, that we've bought into or believed along the way, and that we just assumed were truth based upon what we saw modeled to us growing up, what our environment showed us, media, culture, society.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, all of our subconscious beliefs really start to happen between birth to age 7. And so based upon our environment that we grow up in, we are like sponges, and we just absorb. We don't yet have the brainwave capacity to decipher, is this helpful? Is it not helpful? We just see what's modeled, and we take that as reality. So we start to form beliefs from that. And from there, depending on what a person does, whether it be sports or dance or academics or different forms of art, can influence and impact how we're able to move through those different areas of passion.
Mm-hmm.
What are we?
It makes me think about, even from any sort of dance instructor, coach, studio owner, whatever kind of position of power someone may find themselves in compared to the dancer, the importance of the words they use and how they interact with the dancers that they're helping train or helping guide through things, making sure that it's not, I think of a scene from shows like Dance Moms, where it's like, here's the pyramid, and so was the best this week. Why didn't everyone else, do as well as her, and things like that, where it's, that, especially to someone who is very young, or
Yes.
people who are maybe new to a dance style, kind of young within what they're doing. That's a very impressionable time for them to be exposed to stuff like that.
Well, that's exactly what happened to me. That was kind of where the start of my story began, as I was 12 years old, and I had been training at a dance studio since I was about 2.5. So I had been there, give or take a little over 10 years, or under 10 years. And my parents were divorcing.
Mm-hmm.
And because of where my mom was moving to, it didn't make sense to continue driving the distance to that studio. And at that point, we thought we were good. My parents were good friends with the owner of the studio. She had become a close mentor. And we had met privately with her, both my parents and I, to let her know what was happening. I'd no longer be attending. And it was after my parents were done with the meeting, they went to the restroom or whatnot, getting ready to get into the cars. She was with me in a restaurant, and she pointed her finger in my face and she said, "You'll never amount to anything as a dancer." And so, at the time, I just knew that that was something mean to say. And I remember feeling hurt by it. But what I didn't realize is that I had taken it to heart so deeply. And literally everything I did after that point in my dancing was a struggle, and just met with one roadblock after another, whether it was an external roadblock of like not making the role I wanted when I auditioned, or it was more of an internal roadblock of second guessing myself, or again, that self-critique to the point of harming my creativity and my drive to show up and practice. Everything was just met with a lot of challenge.
Mm-hmm.
And when I transitioned into West Coast Swing, and I knew that's what I wanted to do full time as a career at that point, I'd been dancing since I was 2.5. I was in my early 20s. I was well trained, and I knew I had technically what it took to progress from the very beginning stages of the dance. But in competitions, I could not make it out of a prelim.
Mm-hmm.
And all my coaches were saying, "Yes, you're doing everything technically right. I don't even understand why you're not making finals. Just keep at it, keep going." And it was really at the point where I was ready to quit. And quitting had never been in my vocabulary before. And just getting to that rock bottom place of being ready to walk away from literally my childhood dream. I was like, something has to work. Like there has to be a reason why this is not happening. And it was in conversation with my mom, who at the time was doing clinical hypnotherapy, as well as another modality. She and I were just having conversation, and this memory of that teacher, mentor, saying I would never amount to anything as a dancer got brought up. And it was just like a eureka aha moment. Like, what? That
Mm-hmm.
has been the driving self-sabotaging force from age 12 to early 20s.
Mm-hmm.
And everything externally happened as a reflection to prove that belief to be true to myself. And so it was at that point where my mom offered to support me with doing some of the work that she was doing to subconsciously start shifting my own limiting beliefs. And it
Mm-hmm.
was the only thing I started doing differently in my dancing. And within about, I want to say 2 to 3 months, I started making finals. I did nothing else different. Everything else stayed the same except the work I was doing with my own internal talk.
Mm-hmm.
And things really started to shift for me competitively after that work. And I started making finals. I started progressing up through the West Coast Swing competition ranks very quickly, to the point that within 4 years of my very first competition and struggling really for like that first full year, I
Mm-hmm.
competed and made finals at the top level, which is called champions. And so that's what I was referencing at the beginning, is when I saw the fast shift that took place within that 2 to 3 months and then exponentially within the following 3 years, I thought this stuff really can work. Like, this is really
Mm-hmm.
powerful and impactful. And I want other people to feel that they can do something about those thoughts and feelings that hold them back from being their best selves.
I love that. And there's so many things that can create, or that are those moments that can create these thoughts that we have for ourselves, whether it's comments from somebody who's in a mentor position. Even thinking for myself, I was injured in high school as a dancer, and back then we didn't have people who really like understood how to recover from some of that stuff well, other than just saying, just stop dancing and you'll be fine. And so, for years it was sort of like, oh, I don't know if I can get back into this. Am I going to ever be at the same level that I was? I think I've lost, any progress that I've made, and that kind of stuff. And so it was more from, can my body even handle this, and like
Yeah.
second guessing my body for things for a while.
Yeah.
So whether it's the words, something physical, I mean, there's so many different elements that can come into it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's really fascinating to dive into where your own roots are that
Hmm.
are, holding you back, because it could be something that you would never think about would be related,
Yep.
but it absolutely is impacting your current reality. Yeah.
Hmm. Thinking about people who want to make a transition from that more kind of amateur or hobby level, or whatever we want to call it, to taking it to that next level of pursuing something professionally. What do you think is maybe a piece of advice, or like a common thing that you see during that transition that people often need to work on?
It's so unique to the person. I think it's hard at that stage to generalize. I usually
Hmm.
recommend, though, in whatever transition you're wanting to make in life, to forecast or to foreshadow to yourself, if that reality were to become true, what would that mean? So an example is going from amateur to pro. One example could be you have a lot more eyes on you. There's a lot more politics involved, possibly in the culture of the dance scene that you're involved in.
Hmm.
Um, Time management, the balancing of time as a professional. How do you navigate financial conversations and contracts with event directors or those that are wanting to hire you, or a studio that's wanting to bring you on?
Hmm.
And start to think about the reality, the full picture reality of what that lifestyle would look like. And then once you have that as mapped out as possible or thought through as possible, then start to look at each section and go, how do I feel about that? Where do I feel tightness and resistance in my body? Or what thoughts are starting to stream through my head?
Hmm.
I'm going to be on the road. For example, with West Coast Swing, as a pro, I was on the road like 36 to 45 weekends a year, so that meant a lot of travel, which, yes, there's lots of pros to that, but there's cons of exhaustion and depletion and time away from then fiance, now husband, and, trying to maintain and build a relationship with him at that time. So I started to think about what would be the realities of these actions coming to fruition. And
Mm-hmm.
okay, am I okay with that? Do I believe I could manage the time balance with those things? Do I believe in my body being able to withstand the demand? Again, the being seen piece is really huge. And sometimes we're more afraid of our own success than we are our own failure. So looking at our beliefs, our feelings that arise on any of those. And then anytime you start to meet resistance or feel like I can't do this, pay attention to that, write that down, and then start to ask yourself, why am I resisting that? Or why do I think this or feel this way? Then what would I need to be different internally
Mm-hmm.
so that this path would be less stressful, more easeful, more joyful, more successful? And that usually is a good process to start to get that internal dialogue going and that self-reflection happening, so that
Mm-hmm.
you can, as much as possible, work with those pieces that might cause larger issues down the road if you don't pay attention to them when you first have the opportunity to.
Mm-hmm. Even thinking about some of those different pieces and really being able to break it down into those separate elements, it is something that my brain is also going, oh yeah, even from the entrepreneur side and opening my own clinic and all of that of, kind of imposter syndrome with things, or, well, I got training on this part, of being the clinician, but what about the business side? What am I doing with that? And, being able to sit down and think about what all was going into this and where I need to maybe kind of upload on some of my training or spend more time on things. Where do I feel comfortable? What are my strengths as an individual that I can leverage versus what do I maybe need to outsource or go to other people to get some help for? And so, yeah, I mean, whether it's dance or other things in life, all of the same concepts apply for sure.
100%. Yeah. As far as an artist goes, one that I have found definitely true to be for myself, and as I've talked to a few other people, because I tend to work with those who do dance more as a hobby. I haven't worked
Mhm.
as frequently with those that are more in the professional realm, although I would love to be working with more individuals like that. Is that old belief that has spanned generations of the starving artist.
Yes.
And that idea of going out and pursuing your passion as a career, is it really going to be lucrative, or is the stability going to be there? And oftentimes there's
Mhm.
a lot of pressure from families, that, well, if you go do dance, have a backup plan, because you're only going to be able to do it for so long, or good luck with that. And there's a lot of sarcasm that could be involved.
Yeah.
And so by working with that old age belief, whether it's familial or cultural, of that idea of the starving artist, because that could be your
Mhm.
reality, or you could have a reality with your art form that is very lucrative and very stable, and can provide a very comfortable living for you
Mhm.
and your family potentially. So
Mhm.
that's one that is frequently there at that more professional approach.
Yeah, I can definitely see that and thinking, kind of suffering for your craft, whether it's
Yeah,
physically suffering, like it's normal to be in pain if you're working on these things, or it's normal to not have money, or, things I see online sometimes on whether it's posts online or discussion chats and things like that, talking about, well, I just want to get my foot in the door. So I'm going to do these things for free, or I'm going to like really essentially kind of undercut my pricing.
undervalue yourself.
Exactly. And
Yeah,
so, that affects a lot too if you're always coming from that perspective on things.
100%. Yeah, the way you would, as an entrepreneur, that'll completely change the type of clientele that you attract, the longevity of the clientele that you attract. Because if you don't value yourself and the services and the skills and the experience and the wisdom that you bring, the clientele won't see it as valuable either. And so you'll attract
Mhm.
a lower paying client or students into your studio or your business if you're not
Mhm.
really appreciating and valuing and putting that value and reflective in your prices of your services.
Hmm. And if it's people who are in the position of hiring folks or, setting up some of these events where they're negotiating contracts, being realistic about all of that of, no, I'm not going to ask this person to come on and do these many hours of things for really, really cheap. Um, but what is reasonable for someone to get paid as that expert, as that artist coming in as a guest?
Yeah. Yep. And I think it really comes down to knowing what you bring to the table, because it's hard to argue for a higher contract if you're rocky in what you even offer an event or a studio or a student. And
Mhm.
sometimes people are really afraid of coming across as egotistical and being perceived in a way, that makes them unattractive. But there's a difference between having confidence and valuing what you bring to the table, and then again, going to the other extreme where you're just super ego driven,
Mhm.
have a big head. And then how do you convey that when you're having those types of conversations?
Mhm. I think that's an important one for particularly the folks who are kind of getting started on the more professional realm or starting to book jobs as a dancer or whatever that may look like, to keep that sort of idea in mind for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, there's all sorts of conversation about money that go into it, beliefs about money. It's a really fascinating conversation to have. Yeah.
Mhm. Let's go back to this idea of comparison in
Okay.
dance. Um, something that I sometimes hear from the younger dancers that I work with is, they're in class and they'll hear, oh, well, so and so is always getting compliments, or they're always the ones pulled up to demonstrate things. Or sometimes for things like West Coast Swing, it could be, well, they're always making finals and I'm not, or they're always placing and I feel like I'm competing all the time and I'm getting nowhere. Um, what are what are maybe a couple of the more common things that you see as far as kind of limiting beliefs in that comparison area? I know that it also can be very individualized, but
Mhm.
are there some common threads that you notice?
I'm not good enough. At some point, I feel like that typically has happened for a person in their life,
Mhm,
of that belief of I'm not good enough or I'm not worthy of succeeding, being successful. And so, again, some sort of self sabotage, whether you're conscious of it or not, can be at play that then creates a different reality and result externally.
mhm,
So, I'm not good enough is a big one. Um, Again, the being seen part, I mean, it just shows up time and time again with so many of my clients. I just started working with someone recently, and for her growing up, anytime she was good at something, her parents would pull her out of the activity because she
mm,
was outshining the parents. So there could be like a self protection mechanism at play where, even though it happened at a young age potentially, what happens subconsciously is the subconscious doesn't understand time. It doesn't know the difference between what happened when you were 2, 3, 7 and now as an adult.
mhm,
So it has no understanding of that. So what was real for you at the time of a stressful situation or a small trauma, big T or little t trauma, if that has not subconsciously been resolved and worked through, it will still carry over into your adult experiences today. Um, so there could be some sort of self protection mechanism. Well, at least I'm getting to dance, because if I outshine or I, do really well at this, then XYZ will happen based on a
mhm,
previous experience that took place
mhm,
younger. Um, I've worked with several women in the West Coast swing community, again, who do it more as a hobby, not so much professionally. Um, where there was sexual abuse, rape that took place. And so there's an actual physical fear that if they were to move in one particular way, it could be, attracting the wrong attention. And then again, they would be at risk for something like
yep,
that. So I've worked with several clients who has had that take place. in their life, sadly,
Mhm.
and them just feeling unsafe in their body to move in particular ways. So
Mhm.
maybe they're physically capable of doing it, but there's that emotional and real fear of, them being taken advantage
Mhm.
of again. Or physically, there's so much stress in the body that our body literally would not allow us to move that way. Tightness, soreness, whatever it could be,
Yeah.
could be at play as a protection mechanism.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, but I'm not good enough, and the being seen part in some capacity usually shows up in the comparisonitis.
Mhm.
And the needing to belong, or like a really wanting to belong
Yeah.
or seen or appreciated.
Mhm. A couple of things that come to mind as you're chatting there is, even to one of your last points where, I had experiences in life where I suddenly was at a point where I was starting to have panic attacks around certain circumstances or certain people. And that would just like come in full force, in particular in competition. And so it was like, oh my gosh, how am I going to deal with this panic attack when it suddenly is happening while I'm on stage with a room full of people looking at me and all of that sort of thing, and needing to figure out ways to work through some of that and understanding what were maybe some of my triggers for what was happening, or why was I mentally in that place, and being able to work through some of that. And even thinking, from the comparison perspective too, sometimes it's, like for me, there's context of things where it's like, for example, I don't compete very frequently. I mean, I probably compete on average twice a year since I've been doing West Coast, but I do reasonably well when I do compete. I'm seeing other folks where it seems like they're progressing super quickly through things, but then in context, they're competing at least once a month. And there's a lot more exposure to the environment of competition and the dance floor with the lights and all of that kind of stuff, more chances to work on their dance, more lessons that they're taking, all of these things. And so it's like, well, for the little bit that I'm doing, I'm actually doing pretty well,
Right.
versus just looking at sort of volume of, but they're doing so much better than me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, everyone's pace is different, everyone's personal life and its impacts, can change how
Mhm.
we are progressing or appearance of progressing. Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Mhm. And sometimes I think too is, just like we were talking about with something else, of kind of the pros and cons, like of being on the road as a professional. Um, the pros and cons of, yes, they may be progressing a lot with the way that they're approaching their dance and competitions and that sort of stuff, but maybe they've put themselves in a position where it's not great financially, or behind the scenes they're super stressed about other things, or like what other things were maybe compromised a little bit. We're seeing all of this success in one place, but what else is happening? So it's kind of that grass is greener sometimes too, of I want that, but we don't know what else is going on.
Yeah, I talk a lot with my clients about really being clear on why are you dancing and knowing why you're dancing and ensuring that your actions align with your why. And that
Mhm.
oftentimes we outgrow our whys. And so it's really important to come back to every so often, why are you dancing now? And are the actions that you're taking and doing in alignment with your current why? Or are your actions, um, were they in alignment with your old why? But it
Mhm.
doesn't fit anymore. So, one client that was in my group coaching program that just wrapped up, um, was one that was traveling fairly frequently, competing a lot, and he had gotten to this place where he didn't love dance at all, and he was really confused about missing that joy that he used to have. And he kept saying, okay, well, if I go to more competitions and, if I practice more and if I do all these things, I'm going to find my joy for dancing and moving again. And throughout the course of the program, kind of his big aha at the very end, it happened our very last week on our coaching call, was he was like, I just don't think dance fits where I'm at in my life anymore. I'm at a different stage of my life, professionally, in my career, with my wife. Like I have other and different priorities now, but he was still doing the actions that were in alignment with his old why. And so just having that awareness and clarity brought about so much release of stress. Yeah. Because he was then starting to become aware of what was an alignment for him and being at peace with letting the competition side go, and that pressure or drive to progress in a way that was socially celebrated and accepted. It's like, okay, I can integrate and engage myself with dance differently now. Maybe it'll just be more social rather than competitively driven, but it'll free up the time to do these other things I want to do.
I see those sorts of conversations come up a lot with the young dancers that I work with in the clinic, where, they're maybe getting to like junior, senior year of high school. They're thinking about, what does life look like after high school? Am I going to college? Am I doing some other training? Am I, lots of different places that they can go at that point. And sometimes some of them, they've been so ingrained in dance and a certain level of maybe competition or pre-professional training, conservatory programs, all of these things, vocational programs. But as they're starting to kind of investigate what this next step in life is going to look like, it's like, is that really what I want to do? And sometimes having some really great conversations with them where, it's like, well, I think what I like is the creative aspect of it, but I don't know that dance itself is necessarily what I want to continue doing. Maybe I want to study art and be an artist of some sort in that sense, or, lots of different things. But like, I feel really fortunate to be able to be with them in that point of time where, my main purpose there is to help them from the physical standpoint. But because we get to know each other really well, these conversations come up, and it's just cool, especially for young people like that, to see them kind of like work through some of that stuff for themselves.
Yeah, and if they can work through it at that stage and be able to have that skill set of the reflection and working through it, oh my gosh, it will serve them so beautifully later on in life, because those phases of life are going to happen multiple times.
Yeah.
And to be able to ask yourself those types of questions is so important, because then you can constantly, again, be in alignment with who you are becoming and who you want to become, as opposed to who you used to be. That may not be true anymore. One of the, I think, right along with what you're saying, is asking yourself, what identity have I constantly lived by? Like, what identity have I assumed throughout my whole life? You're talking about these, young individuals going into college or whatnot. And especially if they've trained since they were 2.5 or since they were first walking, there's going to be an identity that they are probably really rooted in. And one powerful thing to be able to do is recognize, what identity are you really wrapped up in, or multiple identities, and are you willing to let that identity go so that you can step into whatever that new chapter of life has to offer that you want to go into. That's something I've really had to work through the last 5 years, but really since my second son was born, was having this identity wrapped up in being a professional West Coast swing dancer on the road so many weekends a year, going to so many events and doing particular competitions and performances and routines and yada, yada, yada. And I was finding a lot of resistance, or struggle, I should say, moving into this more robust coaching aspect on the mindset piece, because I was still really locked into wanting that. And after my second son was born, that was what really had me start questioning, okay, it's okay to let that identity go. I can still dance. I can still go to events. Frequency might be different, but here's this other realm where I can be really supportive to dancers and help them achieve what they want to achieve. And that looks different, but it means I have to let that identity or that part of my life go. And I was listening to a podcast recently, and I loved this analogy is, instead of the idea of letting it go and it's dead, it's gone, forever lost in the past,
Yeah.
this idea of composting it. How can you
Mm.
take what you've learned and the wisdom you've gained, or the services you've offered, the classes you've offered, and compost it so that it fuels and gives birth to something new in your life? And when I heard that, I just thought, that's really, really beautiful, because then it's really not letting it go and never using it again. It's just bringing it into your experience in a very different way.
Mm-hmm. And there's so much that we can take, thinking about the journey as a dancer and like what it means to be a dancer. There's so many things that apply to other areas in life.
Oh, yeah.
Like you, I grew up, I started dancing when I was 3,
Uh-huh.
doing ballet, tap, jazz, all that stuff, and then discovered West Coast swing in my early 20s. And, there are things of how you approach training and discipline and social interactions, and I mean, so many different elements that all those years of the dance life taught me that have served me well in other capacities that have nothing to do with dance. And so, yeah, to think that it's like just, well, that's gone. No, it's informed so much.
Yep. Yep. Laid the groundwork, the foundation for what it is
Mhm,
now. Mm-hmm.
mhm.
Yeah.
Thinking about what you do from the coaching perspective, um, what might someone recognize in themselves, or like what might be some things that they're encountering that could trigger them to go, maybe it would be helpful for me to seek out coaching like
Mm-hmm.
this?
Anywhere that you feel stuck is a pretty good place to start.
Mhm.
So that could be in showing up to your practices. It could be stepping onto the stage and performing. There's some sort of freeze action that takes place, or you feel like you can't access um, the choreography, or you can't access the ability to improv and freestyle in the moment. It could be just being tired of being tired.
Mhm.
You just that feeling of, I'm so tired of beating myself up. I'm so tired of feeling frustrated about my dancing, or I'm exhausted of this feeling like a struggle. Tired of
Mhm.
feeling like I'm always comparing myself. A big one that has brought a lot of clients into conversation with me is, I've lost my joy. I don't like, what happened. I used to love it, and now I don't even want to watch a video of dance.
Mhm.
That's a pretty big indicator that something has shifted. And if you want to explore that, there are likely answers that are waiting for you. And then what you do with those answers, or those pieces of clarity, of course, there's can be conversation about that. But for a lot of
Mhm.
people, it used to be fun, and it's not anymore.
Yeah.
Or, I know it can be really, really fun. There's something that's calling me to this style of dance. How can I access that?
Mhm. It also sounds like it would be a great opportunity for dancers to work with someone like you for those kind of like transitional times, whether it's they want to transition to being a professional, or different stage in life, or, some of those kinds of things too.
Yeah, like you said, I think dance is a large mirror oftentimes of what's going on in other areas of our life, and vice versa. And so
Mhm.
there can be a lot. I really, when I work with a dancer, I look at things from a much more holistic perspective. It's not just maybe the one initial goal that you have of making finals and doing well. It's looking at you as a whole person, and what else is going on in your life, what else is going on inside of you that is
Mhm.
impacting you in reaching that goal, or reaching it with more ease or efficiency. Or,
Mhm.
I love joy. So I talk about joy frequently, because I think when we follow joy, things tend to happen with a lot more ease. They click into place, the right opportunities show up, right? The right
Yeah.
connections, the right people that you need to know tend to happen. So I'm a
Mm-hmm.
big proponent of following your joy. Um, but yeah, looking at your whole life and what else is impacting you and making that
Mm-hmm.
transition or reaching the goal.
Mm-hmm. It makes me think of something that is a memory that I come back to periodically when I'm talking with folks, but even just like knowing what dance brings to me, not, from that like joy perspective, or for me, it's a big stress outlet or creative expression or all of these different things. There was a time, I don't know, probably a couple of years ago now at least, where I just was flat out having a bad day. And
Mhm.
by the end of the day, I was supposed to go take a tap class. I was like, oh, all I want to do right now is like go buy ice cream and sit and cry in a parking lot and eat my ice cream. Like, that's what sounds good.
Yeah.
But it's like, well, I already made plans and I already paid for the class. Guess I'll at least change for class and decide. And then it's like, well, I'm already changed. I guess I'll drive over there and see how I feel. And then I'm sitting in the parking lot. Well, I'm already here. I might as well go in. And then as soon as I walked into the dance studio, it was like, wait, something feels right about this. And then I get in and I put my tap shoes on and we start warming up. And it was like, this is exactly what I needed right here as this
Mhm.
outlet for the bad day that I was having. Like,
Yeah.
it was my form of release and recovery from that day. So
Mhm.
sometimes when I'm in those points where it's like, oh, I don't want to go do this, or this is the last thing I want to go do,
Mhm.
revisiting memories like that of maybe it's exactly what you should be doing right now.
Yeah, yeah, it's a matter of what's regulating to your nervous system, what's going to bring you back into a regulated state. And movement is a beautiful tool for regulating.
Mhm. Mhm.
Dance is powerful, whether it's in a structured class like you're talking about, or just free form dancing, with the lights off and the music blared.
Mhm.
Yep.
Exactly.
Hmm.
So I think at this point, this is a wonderful opportunity for a special segment on the show. On every episode, we have the final bow. This
Okay.
is essentially the take home message for folks. We've talked about a lot of different things during this episode for a lot of different people. For those who've been listening along or watching along, if they walked away with just one thing from everything that we've talked about, what do you hope they walk away with?
Is that wherever you feel a little stuck or just completely, held back from achieving whatever it is you want to achieve in your dancing or other area of life, you absolutely can be the person that helps yourself to move through that. And oftentimes by asking those real honest vulnerable questions to yourself of internally, where is that resistance coming from, why do you believe that, and what would you want instead, is really a powerful way to be able to move through any roadblock that you are experiencing, whether you perceive it as a little one, and there's lots of little ones all the time, or these massive roadblocks, mountains that just appear to be standing in your way. You know what's on the other side of the mountain, but you can't seem to get past it. That there's usually an internal belief or set of beliefs that is largely contributing to that perceived experience of not being able to move past it, and that you
Mhm.
can work with that internal world to create a different reality. You don't have to stay stuck.
Mhm. I think that's a wonderful take home message from our conversation today. Then, last and certainly not least, is the shameless plug. This is your opportunity to plug anything that you want to promote for yourself, for organizations that you're involved in, anything that's coming up for you. So, this is your time for that.
Oh, thanks, Alyssa. Yeah, I've started this week, actually starting tomorrow, launching a online course for people who want to learn West Coast swing from the very beginning. And
Mm.
that includes some instructional videos. I have an online community that's going to be focused on supporting a person who's brand new to the dance and all the aspects that go into learning West Coast swing. And so if that feels in alignment or piques your interest, you could check that out. And the other thing that I'm really, really excited about is I have a group coaching program called Confident on the Dance Floor. And it's a program where we spend about 14 weeks together, deep diving into a lot of the topics that we talked about today. So there's coaching calls, there's trainings, there's workbooks, and just wrapped up with my very first one at the time of this recording about 2 weeks ago. And so many people said it was really just eye-opening. They felt the difference in their dancing. Even their therapists were like, this is really great information. This is helping shed a lot of light on other things that the person was working on. So again, a very holistic way of looking at how to improve your dancing and your experience of it. So I'll be offering that 1 to 2 times a year, depending on the year. And that's called Confident on the Dance Floor. And so all of my happenings are primarily on my Instagram, which is at Transform with Tashina, or on my Facebook. And my webpage or my website is tashina.dance if you're more of a website person.
Awesome. I'll make sure to share all of that information out with folks too, so they can find you that much more easily. Thank you so much for your time today. It has been wonderful getting to chat about this side of things, since I know you very well from the West Coast swing side. So It was fun for me having this conversation with you too.
Same here. Thank you for having me.
Dance Med Spotlight is hosted and produced by Alyssa Arms. We discuss all things dance medicine. This has been another episode from Dance Med Spotlight. The Dance Med Spotlight is intended for educational purposes only. No clinical decision-making should be based solely on one source. While care is taken to ensure accuracy, factual errors can be present.